right.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Apologies for us getting started a little slowly. This is our first time back in the studio, so good morning, Dean Mitchell.
Good morning, Dean Rapp.
It is good to see you.
Happy to be here with you.
Great to be here in person, and we're here this morning to talk about Goizueta's Full-Time MBA program. I see my friend Jake from Korea is here this morning. Good morning, Jake. Good to see you. And Derek, if you come off camera with that baby, it would just kind of make our whole day. My name's Melissa Rapp. I'm the Associate Dean of Graduate Admissions here at Goizueta, and joining me is my friend, the Full-Time Program Dean, Brian Mitchell. And we're going to talk about the full-time programs. To get started, Brian, why don't you talk a little bit about the two delivery formats, because Goizueta is unique in that it offers two different ways to get a full-time MBA.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Melissa.
you're welcome.
Good morning again, everyone. My friends all around the world. It's a pleasure to be here talking about, of course I'm biased, but my very favorite subject, which is our full-time MBA programs and some of the details therein. But like Melissa mentioned, some of you might be thinking about ways of getting your MBA. And we have two formats here at Goizueta, which does start to distinguish us from other institutions on how you can get a world-class, top-quality MBA. The first that I'll talk about is what we sometimes refer to as the more traditional route. It's a route that most people in the U.S. will be familiar with in terms of format. It is a 4-semester, 2-year MBA program. And the 2-year MBA program is traditional because many people are looking to fully switch careers when they're coming back to business school. So someone who's coming from a non-business background, or someone who needs a summer internship in order to make the kind of change they're hoping to make in their professional careers, the 2-year MBA program has been around as a tried and true method for doing that forever and ever. And so we have that program where you spend your first year learning your core fundamentals, and then you put those into practice over a summer internship, and then your second year you're really sharpening the saw, ready for your full-time job after business school. What's unique about Goizueta is we also have a 1-year MBA format. It is a 3-semester, 12-month program. It starts in very early May.
Starts in May.
Yes.
Make a note right now if you're thinking about the 1-year program. It starts in May.
It starts very early May. And the reason for that, though, is because all of the core content is delivered to our students in that summer. So you start in May, and from May to August, while our 2-year students are off doing their summer internships, our 1-year MBA students are completing the core requirements. And that really positions the 1-year MBA students to put those core requirements into practice during the final 2 semesters in your elective semesters. It's a really great program for students who are looking to accelerate their career, who are looking to change the trajectory that they are on. The perfect the perfect pathway for students that want to go into things like consulting, when you have some industry experience and you want to apply that in the consulting world, things like family business, things where you're really looking to maximize how you use your time out of the workforce. The return on investment for the 1-year MBA program is something that students find incredibly attractive, not just because it's less, obviously fewer semesters and less tuition, but it's also less time out of the workforce, so less opportunity cost. So if that's something that appeals to you, it's certainly something that we should talk more about as you explore your interest in Goizueta.
Yeah, and sometimes it might be hard to decide. You might be on this chat thinking, well, I'm not really sure. I could be 2-year or maybe 1 year is okay for me. We're here in admissions to kind of help you figure that out. And so feel free to reach out to us to understand which one is going to be the most appropriate program for you. Dean, Brian, we spend a lot of time talking about leadership development in both programs. So why don't we talk a little bit about kind of what does leadership mean here at Goizueta? What's the philosophy behind how we approach leadership development?
Yeah, so that's a great topic for us to be talking about, especially at this time in the cycle. It's still reasonably early. Yeah. People are still trying to figure a lot of things out. And if you look at we can see the screen and faces, and if you all are looking at all of the faces and all of the boxes on the screen, you can think about how many different avenues people will take to pursue their MBA in terms of what you want to specialize in and what you want to grow in and where you want to work. That's going to be all across the board. You take 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers.
10 different answers.
But one of the things that all of you have in common, no matter where you're coming from, no matter what you've done previously, everyone who comes to business school has in common the desire to get better in their leadership journey.
Absolutely.
Whether you've had a lot of leadership experience or none at all, developing as a leader is something that we all have in common when you come into business school. So it's one of the things that brings us together, and one of the reasons why we talk about it and focus on it so much here at Goizueta. We have 3 ways to really hone your leadership journey that we focus on here at Goizueta, and it is a very important strategic priority for us to make sure that those 3 ways are present for all of our students all of the time.
Right.
Those 3 ways, and we can talk more about those through the conversation, and maybe you'll have some questions, are in the classroom, so the academics. There are some theories out there that say, oh, well, you can't really learn leadership in the classroom. You absolutely can.
Yeah.
You absolutely can study the journey of leaders who you admire. You can study the failures that we've all come to know over time and study the lessons learned there. So there's a lot you can do in the classroom, and that's really important. The other piece of it, though, is the experience. You can't really learn and become and develop as a leader just only in the classroom.
Right.
You do have to have certain experiences that go along with that. So there's a whole thread of programming here that goes to supplement what you get in the classroom. And then the third piece, which is probably the most under-recognized aspect of leadership development and the practice of leadership, is the reflection. Yeah. You have to build in time and practice the discipline of reflecting on your leadership journey. I mentioned failures. When you think about what you can learn from others, you can also learn that from yourself and reflect on how to get better. You can reflect on the things that went well and how you can do those better. And so we spend a lot of time building that discipline to reflect. So when you think about how we kind of encompass the experience here at Goizueta with the leadership development journey that you are all on, I think it's those 3 ways that will stand out and makes this experience really distinctive.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we learned during COVID was that you don't get to pick the circumstances you lead under. And the real value of one of the real values of coming to an MBA program like Goizueta is that you develop skills that are applicable in many different situations. So no matter what the organization or economic forces or things out of your control, no matter what happens, you'll have a toolkit that you can use. And I think that's where that experiential part becomes really important. You've got to practice it. And by providing a safe environment where you don't have to worry about your failures, because we actually want you sometimes to experience a failure and to understand what it's like to come back from that. We put you in situations where you aren't going to know exactly what to do. But that's where the real growth happens. When you start to get uncomfortable, that's when you really start to develop those leadership skills. So let's talk about some of the specific activities where we get people a little uncomfortable.
Well, one of the phrases that we use that you mentioned around making sure that we introduce how to navigate difficult situations, we call that building a tolerance for ambiguity. Yeah. A lot of times when you are on the other side of this MBA program, when you're finished, the problems that come across your desk are not going to be these neatly outlined, perfectly framed, step 1, do this, step 2, do that. There's going to be a lot of ambiguity, and this is why MBAs are so highly valued. You have to understand how to navigate that ambiguity, and so we practice that here by introducing situations and scenarios where, in order to get from the starting point to the finish line, you might not have all of the information you need, and that is quite intentional. And that is on some assignments where you have to find the data or work together on assumptions and establishing a framework to get started. That's also in some of the experiences. The leader reaction course, for example. So we do a leader reaction course as part of your introduction to life at Goizueta, which is an actual physical navigation of, you call it an obstacle course or however you want to think about it. It's sort of off-site team building where the challenges, part of what's built into the challenges is that ambiguity. Same thing with our Goizueta Advanced Leadership Academy. Famously known here as the sailing module. It's an advanced leadership immersion where teams of students are on a sailboat in the British Virgin Islands competing with other student teams, literally navigating challenges where you won't have all of the information that you need. And so how do you manage that ambiguity? So it is built into the as I mentioned before, the academic pieces, but also very much intentionally built into the experiential pieces to give you that practice. So that you do have the tolerance, which means you're not frustrated or you don't short circuit when you're faced with, and your COVID example is a perfect example. You're faced with something you had no idea how to prepare for, you had no idea the scale of the impact, but you still have to, you don't get to choose that circumstance. You still have to lead. So it's an excellent example.
I think too, the other thing that is really important to recognize is that leadership isn't always downward. There's also a lot of leading by influence and leading your peers in ways that you might not feel great at right now. Maybe you feel uncomfortable doing that, or maybe you feel like that's a skill that you could build. So what are some of the ways that we have our students build that ability to influence and lead peers and even your supervisor sometimes?
Managing up.
Managing up, absolutely. Also leading.
Yes, absolutely. That is a well established term. But one of the first experiences that you'll have as a student here, and we categorize this as part of the experiential learning journey, is your learning team, your core team, where you spend your entire first semester very close. It's a very intimately sized program. It's an intimate learning experience, and part of that is the closeness of the sections and the closeness of the team. And so throughout your first semester, you're on a learning team where many of your assignments, many of your projects are team-based. And in that scenario, you don't always get to be the leader every time.
Right.
You don't always get to play in your comfort space every time. So if you're coming to us from a background in finance, you're not always going to get to be the finance expert on the team. Someone else is going to have to learn that. And so you would move aside and get into an uncomfortable space yourself. So in the team, you learn with great frequency, right? You got to get the repetition in. You learn with great frequency the roles that you can play as a leader and as an individual contributor, as someone who's leading with the title from the front, and oftentimes someone who's leading as a middle of the pack or as a individual contributing team member. Those teams, though, are asked to do a lot. They are not asked to do a lot all on their own. So one of the things that you can do in your leadership journey here is sign up to be a leadership coaching fellow. So we have leadership coaching fellows that are sponsored by Delta Airlines, one of the big companies here in Atlanta. And it's an entire program where they are trained by executive coaches to give feedback and to work with first-year MBA students and MBA teams to navigate some of the journey on your way to being a high-performing team. So if you meet on the first day and you are in a team and you may have personality conflicts and you may have all these things that you got to
We'll probably have. Not may have. I think it's more, we'll probably have some.
We might have seen this once.
We might, yeah.
Very true. You're not asked to navigate that, plus all of this new content, plus this new environment, plus new faculty members. You're not asked to navigate all of that on your own. So each team has either one or two leadership coaching fellows, which you can sign up to be in your second year, whose job it is to help navigate those that journey, where teams are supposed to go through a storming phase where everything is not perfect, right? In order to get to that journey of high performing. So those are a couple of different ways from the very beginning where you'll see your leadership, journey play out experientially.
Yeah. If any of you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. We can talk for hours about this, but we'd love to answer any specific questions you have, and you can pop those into the chat at any time. Brian, I think we were recently actually talking with some first-year students who were expressing some of this frustration about their team. And it is really interesting when you have been a high performer, and many of our students come from backgrounds where they were successful in undergrad, they've had great starts to their career, they're used to being out in front, and to hear them really reflecting on that experience of having to take a little bit of a back seat and to help influence their peers, you could see the development of, okay, I see what you're doing here, I don't like it, but I'm gonna keep going with it because I know the end goal is gonna make me a more confident leader once I walk across the stage. So why don't we talk a little bit about kind of the global aspect of the program and how that ties into the leadership development.
Right, so I enjoyed that conversation that you're referring to, because you're right, we saw new students, first semester students, you know, talking through some of the challenges that they were having. We also had second year students in the room at the same time, where you and I got a chance to kind of sit back and let those leaders, those second year students, help put it into context and talk about things that we have in our leadership model. And this relates to your question about how global fits in, because there are models and frameworks that you'll learn in business school that are purposefully general, right? Where, again, back to the idea that you can't predict the situations where you'll need to lead. And so some of the things that we learn in frameworks, your job as a leader is to apply them to the specific situation that you're in. And so from a framework standpoint, the things that we talk about are things like working across boundaries, right? And demonstrating resilience. Well, when you're in a really diverse group of people, and you have diversity along all of these different metrics, where you have worked in the past, where you grew up and what that's like culturally, where you have been a leader, where you're coming from, and where you've been an individual contributor. You have all of these things in play that are not specific to where you are locally. These things are even more so when you think about it in the global context. So understanding how these general frameworks work, if you really understand what it takes to work across boundaries, even in a very specific setting, you're more able to understand what that looks like on a more global setting. And you're more able to say, okay, what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling might be different from what I would say or what I would project, but my job as the leader is to work across that boundary and to get us to a place where we can be productive. And the applicability of those kinds of things globally is really what's quite impressive. And in this setting, where almost half of our students come from other parts of the world, but we are small enough that we get to see and work with and have dinner with everyone. That really matters a lot, because you're in it intensely from the very beginning, and so you start to practice that quite a lot. And I think it creates a principled, empathetic type of leader that's really unique to a space like this.
Well, and I think too, students can leverage that then in their career search. And people, for the most part, come to an MBA program to get a new job. They want to move forward in their career in impactful ways. And being able to express how you've been exposed to these opportunities, the breadth and depth of different culture that you've experienced during the MBA program, I think that reinforces that intimate learning environment as a benefit to you in this experience. So that's really important to keep in mind. We do have a few questions in the chat that we will get to, not necessarily in order. Being a strong leader also sometimes means knowing maybe what you're not good at or what you need some assistance with. And sometimes people think about, what kind of network do I have to help support me in my leadership? We can't all be good at everything. So talk a little bit about the Goizueta Network and how that intersects with our students as they go on this leadership journey.
Yeah, so I'm hopeful that most people who are coming into a program like ours recognize what Melissa just described, right? I have some blind spots. I have some things that I need to develop and that I need to work on.
Might come out during the reflection.
It might. or you might be inclined to think that and feel that, but not want to say it, not want to, you think this is the classic imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
You get into a space and you've earned your way into that space, but then you look around and you think, I'm around all of these smart people who have all these impressive backgrounds. Oh my gosh, do I belong here?
Right. We see that look on onboarding.
See it on onboarding.
Yeah, you can see it in their eyes where they're like, oh, hey.
Yeah. And then you meet your faculty members who are some of the brightest minds in the whole world at the subjects that they are that they're teaching, and you just get this whole idea that am I really?
Should I be here?
Should I be here? I think that's an important thing to acknowledge, and to first say that everyone who earns their way into our program has done exactly that. You've earned your way here, so you certainly belong here. And we all have blind spots that we're trying to develop and that we're trying to work on. And sometimes you can do that by speaking up faster in your team setting. So you're on a team where you have someone who's good at one thing that you might not be good at, and we try to be intentional about that. You obviously can do that in the classroom when you are in a class where you're unfamiliar with the content or you haven't had experience. But to the point about the Goizueta Network, this experience as a student is so transformative for so many folks because of the way that we have delivered it over the years. This is a very high touch, a very close-knit community where you are helped by the person next to you, and you are helped by the people who you reach out to in your career and for the kind of help that you need to fill these blind spots. So our alumni community, our community in the professional spaces where our students are seeking to go, is very responsive and very helpful to having conversations around, listen, I know you came here with this skill set.
Right.
You might not feel great about this, or you might be intimidated by that, but here's how I navigated that, and here's how you can as well. So it's a very, I would say sometimes, it's hard to think about a business school in the way that we're describing it, because business itself can be so transactional, but this experience is the opposite of that. It is the opposite of that. This is a relationship, and we understand that it's in our DNA, and so the network is very responsive, and I have a lot of experience having seen that help students over the years.
Yeah, and I think that is a question we get a lot in admissions, is it's a small school, is the network going to be big enough to support what I'm trying to do? And I think what we find is that because it is such an intimate relationship-based experience as a student, we do find our alumni network to be incredibly responsive, and to understand that, hey, we are small, we like it that way, and we care about every person who's coming behind me to help them achieve their goals.
No question. I'd rather have a small, tight-knit community where we get to know each other, and where the relationships matter, and where we call, someone picks up the phone.
Yeah.
I'd rather have that than a bunch of ignored emails,
Sure.
and a non-responsive, albeit huge, network. So I think this works very well for our students.
I think it works great for them.
Absolutely.
That's the feedback that we get from them. It's fun this time of year. Our second-year students are all now coming back from their internships, and they just have this glow about them. This just, you can see it on their faces how much they enjoyed putting into practice the things that they learned in their first year, and that it all worked. I think there's a little bit of skepticism in the first year of, okay, they're making me do all this stuff. Am I ever really going to use this? It's like algebra you lived in high school that you're like, I'm never going to use this. And then they get to their internships and they're like, oh, I am using and it's working. Like, I feel so good about this. And you can just see that excitement.
I do it, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's in big things, like big concepts that people put into practice over the internship, big project plans and formulas. It's also in little things like vocabulary.
Right.
They were talking about market lift, and I knew what that
was.
Right. So you're absolutely right. The second years are in a lighter space now that they have seen this put into practice, for sure.
I do think that that's one of the benefits of an MBA program that kind of goes unspoken, because it's a given. You are going to have an academic experience. You are going to build your knowledge across disciplines to really set you up for success. But what you're going to gain that isn't talked about, I think, enough is the confidence and the ability to be in any room within your organization and have a foothold to understand the conversation and to contribute to it in a meaningful way. And that's something that I think a lot of our students, they don't necessarily articulate it that way, but that's part of the motivation for getting an MBA. It's that feeling of, my undergraduate experience didn't prepare me for all of this. I know a lot about marketing, or I'm an engineer and I can solve problems really well, but business is complicated. Organizations are complicated, and we have students come from education, nonprofit, and traditional business sectors. No matter where you come from, it's complicated. And so to gain that confidence in sitting at the table and being a meaningful contributor is, I think, one of the biggest benefits of an MBA journey.
Right, and asking the right questions and having the confidence to know that sometimes asking a question is the right thing to do rather than thinking that you know a little bit about this. And so it's you mentioned confidence. It's that real confidence that comes from actually knowing enough to know what you don't know sometimes.
Exactly.
And get at, this again built around that tolerance for ambiguity. Mm-hmm. The complications sometimes require further questions, further research. And those are skills that we build. And you see people just rest in that and get a lot more comfortable with the fact that I don't have to pretend to know everything at this table. I have the seat at the table because I've earned it. And sometimes that requires me asking a lot more questions than trying to make other people think I have all the answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Some more good questions in the chat. One around Goizueta clubs, and I think the Goizueta community and the clubs is another avenue for students to build that leadership qualities and to engage with their peers in meaningful ways. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about those club opportunities.
Yeah, it's good timing for that too, because we just had our club fair. So it's one of the first things that we do when the second year students come back from their summer internships. The first year students will have been here for a while, so the second years kind of lay out what club opportunities are out there for students, and there is a wide range. So just because we are a small school does not mean that the opportunity set is limited in any way. And that's true for what you can study in the classroom. So there really is a broad range of things where you can have concentrations and where you can really go deep, but also around the clubs. And the clubs are organized around academic clubs. So you have clubs like the marketing club and the finance club and the consulting club. Those are clubs that exist to help students, again, fill some of those blind spots, but also navigate some of the ambiguity around the career paths. So helping you with recruiting, helping you prepare for interviews. Those clubs exist for those purposes. So you have the academic clubs. They blend in with the professional clubs. So there's a club for just about every kind of profession you can think of. And then there are the social cultural clubs. Things like the Food and Wine Club, things that help you explore. A great city like Atlanta is very, very culturally diverse. So there are clubs that are here for our students to explore all aspects of life here. So you can think about club life in these kind of three columns, and each column has several clubs underneath: the academic clubs, the professional clubs, and the social cultural clubs. Those are things that'll keep you very busy outside of the classroom, but they're important because they give you that balance, and they are further ways to kind of establish and build depth in your relationships with our community. And that kind of context, right, where you're off-site, you're out of the building, you're just out to dinner, you're just doing a wine tasting or something like that with one of the social or cultural clubs, that's still a learning opportunity. Mm-hmm. And that's still an opportunity for you to build your relationship and to talk about both things you've learned in the classroom, but also life in general. And that's part of your journey, your leadership journey, your growth journey while you're in school as well. So that's a really active part of our community, is the club culture.
Yeah, and I think that the great thing, earlier we talked about a safe environment to fail and a safe environment to take risk. And for some people, trying a new cuisine or learning about something that they've been interested in but haven't had a chance to learn about in their preferred setting or where they grew up or things like that is a little bit of a risk.
Yeah.
And the great thing about the diversity of the student population we bring together and the diversity of our faculty and staff is that it's totally comfortable and safe for you to say, hey, I want to try this, or I want to join this club. I've never played golf, but hey, I'd love to learn how. And there will be students here and faculty here who are more than happy to share their passions and their insights with you. And that's another way of growing, is just having more experiences.
I have a really good example of all the things that you just said too, on a series that we do. It's around leadership. It's a leadership dinner series that I lead it each semester. And last semester, these are dinners where students can come in small groups. We have dinner together and we have a discussion around a leadership topic. And last semester it was around shareholder capitalism versus stakeholder capitalism. And these are students from all different backgrounds. You sign up for this. It was a wonderful experience. Well, two of the students who had those dinners last spring are also vice presidents in our Goizueta Business Association, the GBA we call it, which is our student government. And they happen to be the vice presidents for our off-campus programming. So the things that we do socially, culturally, anything we do off campus. And they came to me at the end of last semester with an idea on how we could do the dinner series a bit differently. So one of those students is from Ghana. And she said, let's still have this dinner series, but we'll move it around to different restaurants that are different cuisines and from different parts of the world every time. So there'll be a different location. Because my series was at the same place every time. They thought that kind of variety would add another level of learning, of exposure, of cultural immersion, all the things. And it has been wildly even more popular because of that.
Sure.
And because students know that the idea came from
a student. Yeah, right. For sure.
So it's a really great application of leadership and that kind of cultural immersion that comes along with this type of environment.
Well, and I think that's a great example too of kind of the student-led culture, where even if you get here and you're like, oh, I thought there'd be a cricket club. I love cricket. There has to be a cricket club. Dean Bryan and his colleague Vernon are here to help make a cricket club. Like there wasn't a dinner series across cuisines, and students felt like that would add value. So we figured out a way to make that happen, and that's a smaller version of that, but things like the Peachtree Minority Venture Fund, the John Lewis Case Competition, those are all things that students brought to the table. And that is another one of the ways that our students really shine in this small environment, is if they have an idea, there is a support system here to make that into a reality. And talk about an exceptional example to bring to an interview conversation or a recruitment event, to be able to say, well, I had this idea and worked with the school leadership to put it into play, and now we're seeing our students being more culturally aware, more globally sensitive, better at taking risks. It's just a great opportunity for students to really take whatever they're passionate about and bring it here to the school.
No question. I think that's really, the topic today, of course, is leadership, but I think that's really one of the things, leadership is one of the things that makes Goizueta so special. And I talk about this all the time in terms of, how we do what we do. It's not just, we teach you some of the things that you think about when you think about business school, but it's how we deliver those things. And in an environment like this, where it's so flat, you are going to be seen, you're going to be heard. And our culture is not to shut you down, because we don't do that here. Our culture is to see how we can say yes.
Yeah.
How can we navigate the pathway to saying yes to an idea like the John Lewis Case Competition, and saying yes to an idea like a dinner series all around the city. My job isn't to sit there and tell you and shake my finger at you and say that's not what we do here. And I do think that that's a difference that is created by the kind of community, the kind of culture that we have here.
Yeah, that path of evolution for the program, I think, allows our students to bring what they're seeing in the market before getting here into the business school, which makes our experience more relevant, more timely. I think the DEI concentration is another example. We've been concerned about and thinking about DEI for a long time, but in recent years, it has become such an important issue for all organizational leaders to understand that we've made it into a concentration. And I think students had a lot of influence in making that happen.
No question about it. Students did, and we all as a community did, but I do think it was our internal journey, our student leadership and our faculty and staff leadership internally that has created, again, a very distinctive experience here at Goizueta, in particular around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mentioned earlier, the way that we think about and execute leadership here is around academics, experiential, and reflection. We had those, the reflection and the experiential components when it came to DEI. We had those, and I do think that a lot of other schools did as well. We were doing things around the reading series. We were doing things around getting out into the city of Atlanta to some of the unique offerings that we have as the home of the civil rights movement. We had those things in the program. But when we decided that we needed to get as serious as a school can and should be around this topic, we had to get inside the classroom into that academic component. And more than just creating a course here or amending a course there, we went as far as creating an entire academic concentration around DEI. And so now all three of those, the academics, the experiential, and the reflective, diversity, equity, inclusion is woven into all three of those. So you talk about a leadership journey that frames or helps shape the right type of leader, someone who is, principled and empathetic and has the right ethical compass. This is a place where where we walk the walk. This is not just about talking the talk. This is a place where we walk the walk.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brian, we're kind of coming up on what we've said would be the end of this conversation. Obviously, we have just scratched the surface of things to talk about regarding the MBA journey. And so I'd like to share some upcoming opportunities with you to continue the conversation. One is Super Saturday, which is October 1st. We are very excited that Super Saturday will be in person again this year, and you'll be able to visit us here on campus. It's a great opportunity to kind of maximize any efforts you make to get to Atlanta. You'll be able to have a classroom experience, meet most of the student body, interact with faculty, meet staff. If you're applying this year, there's some opportunities to interview. So October 1st is a great opportunity. We also have a Lead Hership, which is our women's leadership specific development program, a Lead Hership women's preview, October 6th and 7th. So again, a lot of bang for your buck. This is going to be focused on the journey of a woman specifically in the business world and in business school. And then on November 10th through 12th, we'll have our Inside Goizueta event. And Inside Goizueta is a diversity preview day. So if you feel passionate about diversity, if you yourself consider yourself a diverse candidate, Inside Goizueta is a great opportunity to learn about that experience, specifically as a student here. Brian and I will be at all of these events. We can't wait to see you. The admissions team hosts weekly events, including information sessions, something called Ask Admissions Anything. So if you have a question we weren't able to get to, that's kind of the practical, tactical, how to apply, what kind of recommender to use. Ask Admissions Anything is a drop-in opportunity virtually to speak with the admissions team. And then we have class visits. So this is probably my favorite way for a candidate to understand the culture and the interaction of students while they're in the classroom and the interaction with faculty. So definitely recommend a class experience. We do have those available in person and virtually. They change regularly, so if you don't see what you're looking for on the website, keep checking in on that website. Did I miss anything? There's
No, I
so
thought
many
that was,
things going on.
That was very comprehensive, but I also see in the chat that a lot of resources online are there for you if you didn't catch any of those or want to go deeper on any or all of those. And I encourage you to do so. As Melissa mentioned, I will be at all of these, she will be at all of these, and we look forward to meeting you in person and going deeper into any of the questions that you have around life at Goizueta.
We definitely recognize that as an international student, you might not have the opportunity to travel to Atlanta during the time that you're applying. We do offer virtual events, and one other thing that you can keep an eye out for or think about is our Getting It Done series. We do offer those specifically for international candidates and domestic candidates. That's a great roadmap for how to get your application done. We break down every piece of the application in week-by-week series. You can have access to the recordings or you can watch them live. Admission team members are always on to answer questions. And if you follow along through the whole seminar, we'll waive your application fee and you'll have a ready-to-go application by the deadline date. So it's a great way, if you're a person who likes to have a deadline, it's a great way to keep yourself on track with that application. So, Brian, last minute advice for our folks who are thinking about applying for an MBA.
Apply. That's my advice. Don't wait, and don't wait until you think you have all of the answers, because we never do and we never will. Acknowledge your blind spots as you think through your story and you write through your story in your essays. And as I mentioned before, one thing that's highly relatable for us that we know everyone out there is thinking about and going through is, where am I on my leadership journey, right? Again, you may come from a space where you have a lot or perceive yourselves as having none. Write about that.
Yeah.
That's something where we will want to explore more through your application, through getting to know you, and certainly through your journey here at Goizueta. So start thinking about that and writing about that now.
My advice is also to apply. This is a great opportunity for you to think about your journey and where you've come so far and where you'd like to go. The admissions team is your team. We're here to help, so always feel free to reach out to us via email, text, or drop by our office. It was so great to see all of you this morning. We look forward to seeing you again at future events and hope that you have the very best day possible. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everybody.